So good morning, everyone. As Spencer said, welcome to session 5 of our user-friendly records management webinar series. Today we will be covering off what we call post-go-live support. So these are the activities that you will need to be doing as you go into a more of an operational role within your records management initiative. Session 5, this is the end of our 5-part webinar series. It's been a really interesting journey. I hope that for the folk who have been with us the whole journey, you've found it really useful. We have had people joining us through the process as well. If for any reason today is your first session, then please go back and revisit the webinars posted on our YouTube channel. You can go to YouTube and search for Habanera Consulting. You can see webinars 1 through 4. They've all been posted there. By way of introduction, my name is Rick Martin. I'm the practice lead for Enterprise Content Management here at Habanera Consulting Group. By way of introduction for who Habanero is, Habanero creates great workplace experiences. This is not only through our employee portal and our records management solutions, for which we're very well known, but also through our experience design methodology. For those people who haven't heard of experience design is an industry recognized approach for putting users at the heart of any solution. If you want to learn a little bit more about experience design, you can check out our website. That's habaneroconsulting.com for a bit more information on experience design and specifically on our onboarding experience design case study. So our partner in this webinar series has been Collabware. Many thanks to Collabware for supporting us through the webinar series we have been presenting. Collabware is a company that's building really exceptional information management software. They focus on creating software that is really simple, seamless, and transparent to that end user. And these are critical facets of a successful records management solution. So this is our agenda today. If you have been with us through the journey, it is looking nice and short. I will, at the beginning, just go through very quickly a brief introduction to our understanding and our beliefs around user-friendly records management. And then we're going to just jump into that third section there, actually post-go-live activities. I'm going to have a few final thoughts as we wrap up, and then we'll take questions. So if you do have any questions, please just submit them through the GoToWebinar software, and we will cover those off at the end. If we don't get to all of them, we will follow up with you after the fact. User-friendly records management. Why do we need to care about being user-friendly? Maybe we can actually express this in a better way. My colleague Mallory O'Connor used a phrase the other day that I had not heard before. Human-centric. It struck me that this is exactly what we're striving for in our records management practice. Simply said, we're striving to put humans at the heart of our solutions. Well, what will this do? Why should we care if we're actually able to achieve this goal of being user-friendly, or using our new term, human-centric? I think there are several reasons. We've covered these off, so I'm not going to go into too much detail. First, a better user experience will drive better adoption and better usage. That's quite simple. It's quite straightforward. Secondly, your users are in a global digital environment, be it a personal global digital environment or even their workplace. Based on their personal experiences, be it in the personal electronics space, smartphones, laptops, or even websites, people have increased expectations of the digital experience. These expectations are showing up within the workplace. If we're not matching, or at least getting close to these expectations, then we're losing our users and our employees. If we're not creating a compelling or even a reasonable user experience with the tools, any tools that we're giving them, then we're likely materially and negatively impacting people's satisfaction and their engagement at work. According to Gallup, companies with employee engagement ranking in the top quartile have less absenteeism, 37% less absenteeism. They have 25% less employee turnover. They have 18% higher productivity. And finally, critically, they have 16% higher profitability. These are all numbers and statistics behind employee engagement, but we can also understand this on a more human level too, and this is a real and quite comedic example. If you've ever seen this website, the I Hate Lotus Notes website, you can actually find it. Just Google or search for it. This is actually a real website. You'll understand. If you haven't had a look at it, then go have a look at it after the webinar. Then read through the comments posted. They actually shut down the commenting 2, maybe 3 years ago. But you'll gain a fresh understanding of the impact of poor or unusable technology on those poor souls who are forced to use it on a daily basis. Now, I'm not saying for a moment anyone's records management solution is anywhere approaching the commentary that's being provided on this website. But it's a really great reminder of why we can all up our game in this particular space. So how do we deliver user-friendly records management? We think there are 4 different strategies for this. Number 1, and we've sort of hinted at this, focus on the end user's jobs. Secondly, we want to isolate users from records keeping activities. We don't need to make users into records managers. Thirdly, we want to reduce the barriers that are packed around these records management solutions or any technology solution. And then finally, always plan on evolving or plan to always evolve. Keep the solution relevant and the users engaged. So this is our webinar series. Today we are covering off number 5, post-go-live support and evolution. And I will not review this with you today. You've seen it before. You can find everything up on our YouTube channel. Before we get into the post-go-live activities themselves, we're going to just pause momentarily and talk about the anatomy of an ECM initiative. It sounds obvious where post-go-live activities go, for example, but there's a little bit of a nuance to it, and there's some interesting ramifications on your team. So we've talked up to this point about the main ECM stream, if you like. We advocated starting with a vision and roadmap, for example. Then we have our planning, we have an ECM portal, maybe a functional rollout, some features, subsequent functional rollout, and so on and so forth. And inside all of that, you might be delivering functionality, you might be delivering migration, or what have you. So through this process, of course, we've got maybe an initial go live at the end of that first functional rollout phase and subsequent sort of releases or subsequent deployments into the live environment, the following functional rollouts. Including in all of this, you might have some migration and so on. And then in parallel to this, we've talked about maybe a business solution project where it makes sense to take a particular component of the ECM solution or the ECM landscape and carve it off into a separate project for reasons of budgeting, of focus, maybe of team, or what have you. Or there might be some other parallel project, maybe an ERP system upgrade, for example, that happens to be running sort of in parallel. And then, of course, we have our post-go-live stream of work, and this is these 2 pink boxes. So the post-go-live support focus here, of course, starts at the same moment in time or thereabouts as the initial go-live period. So we have initial go-live, and then we commence post-go-live support. The interesting thing for us is that post-go-live planning period is actually much longer than you would suspect. Our experience is always that you want to start that post-go-live planning earlier in the project than you think. It's not okay in the last couple of weeks as you get towards your go-live date or your initial release date to start thinking about it at that point. In the instance that you have maybe a team to train up, or you have new roles and responsibilities for existing team members, or maybe even new team members, you might need to start thinking about that post-go-live planning way ahead of time, maybe even as far ahead as in parallel with the initial planning period within your project. So that's just one thing to think about. Start early in the process and keep it top of mind as you go through your process. Think about all of the different pieces and different ideas that we will be discussing today. And now we will move into today's focus, which is exactly that post-go-live support. So the post-go-live support, as we discussed, that's simply a collection of things that need to be considered once you're operational. These fall into a few different buckets. So it could be technology, either SharePoint or Collabware or maybe some other piece of technology in your stack. It could be support from a user perspective, end users having questions or what have you, or even operationalization of the ECM program. So those are the three buckets really: the technology, the end user, or really operationalization of the ECM program. These are the different areas across which we look when we're thinking about support. You can see here measurement and insight, service desk, infrastructure, and so on and so forth. We're now going to go into these, each one item by item. So the first one is service desk. This is almost certainly an activity or a function that you already have within your company. And this might be, from an ECM perspective, simply an extension of that group's responsibilities. It could be first level or maybe second level support. A piece of this service desk function is really just to perform service requests. It could be site access, permissions, provisioning new team sites, connecting that SharePoint environment into the Collabware environment in the back end, responding to small issues or maybe some concerns from the end users. There's also an opportunity here from a support desk or from a service desk perspective to maybe manage a solution email box. We typically find that it's really valuable in our solutions to provide end users with an opportunity to provide email, maybe telephone, but certainly email feedback about a solution. The interesting thing with this is that feedback needs to be at a minimum acknowledged. Dear so-and-so, thank you for your email. And then ideally that feedback needs to be actioned as well. One other thing to think about in this service desk realm is what to do with the technical or records management domain queries that will come up. Oftentimes these requests will be of the nature, well, is this a record? Or even, where should this particular piece of content or where should this particular record be classified within our file plan? So you'll need to be ready to answer those sort of questions. Typically that would be a sort of an escalation process into somebody on your records management team, of course. The next step or the next function within post-go-live support is really education. As Natalie mentioned last week, what we want to have is sustainable, repeatable, low-cost options for education. One of the things that we always endeavor to do is to embed that education in other business rhythms. So for example, in the onboarding rhythm, as somebody's coming onto the team, how might we expose them to our enterprise content management thinking? Or maybe in a performance management context, or maybe in other business processes. If you have a project business process, how do we embed enterprise content management or records management thinking into that project business process? There's a collection of different approaches for this, of course. You could have how-do-Is, you could have videos, blogs, FAQs, all sorts of things. This is really communicating with your users the how you do particular records management actions. On the other side of things, there's really a strong rationale to think about communicating to your end users a bit more about the why. Why might they declare this particular area of content or this particular document a record? And that's typically going to be through coaching or mentoring by super users, or maybe coaching or mentoring by your records management team. A couple of other areas for education or for you to consider from an education perspective would be to communicate the project process for new teams as they come into the ECM initiative or come into the ECM program. As you are onboarding a new department, for example, or a new function or a new business process, it's really valuable, and we find this oftentimes with our clients, it's really valuable to sit them down at the beginning and just walk them through the whole project process from soup to nuts so that they understand the process that they're going to be going through within the project as they support your ECM initiative. And then finally, at the beginning of this whole process, we spent a lot of time and energy talking about the vision and the roadmap. And we think that that's really a valuable piece of education as well. We can go back, we can communicate and keep on communicating what the vision is, what the roadmap is, what the outcomes are for the business. So in keeping with that communication of the vision and roadmap, it's also valuable to think about a vision and roadmap refresh cycle. This might even be an annual process. It's probably not sort of a monthly process, maybe every 6 months, every year. You probably don't want to extend it too much beyond a year because a lot can change in an organization. So in terms of that process, this is really just another governance cycle within your organization. You might want to review the previous period. What outcomes did you get? What lessons, what successes have you had? You can confirm the vision and the upcoming activities for the upcoming period, whether it's 6 months or whether it's a year or what have you. Make sure that those still make sense. And then there's also a really interesting opportunity to discuss and evaluate potentially large-scale organizational changes that will impact your ECM initiative. So this could be things like mergers or acquisitions, legislative changes coming down the pipeline, maybe new projects that you need to be aware of from an ECM perspective as well, or from a records management perspective. Another area that you need to think about in a post-go-live world is really measurement and insight. And we've talked a lot about this through this webinar series. We think that there's real value in developing an operational rhythm for measurement and insight. For us, there's 3 different components of this. There's the measures themselves, whether they be records management / enterprise content management measures or business outcomes measures or even proxies. There's the machinations around developing insights. So we've got a collection of measures. What do these actually mean? What insights can we glean from those measures? And then finally, what are the actions we might take once we have those insights? Because without those actions, really there's not much point having the insights or the measures, of course. Another area to think about is bug fixes. Depending on the creation or the type of solution that you're implementing, whether you're doing your implementation mainly through configuration or whether it's an enterprise scale custom development approach that you're deploying into your environment, there's likely to be some bugs or some things that you need to consider from that perspective as well. One of the things from an ECM perspective that we often see is fixing challenges around classification itself. So maybe these are files or documents that have been incorrectly classified, so there might need to be an audit process for that. Or it might be that there are problems with your file plan or your retention schedule perhaps, and you need to do some adjustment there. So really less of a bug as much as just continuing the configuration of the environment. Another area that we are always on top of when we're working with our clients is patch management. So this is really just ongoing monitoring for patches for the operating system or for SharePoint or for Collabware. The next area to think about is infrastructure management. So this is really about managing and hosting your production as well as your non-production environments. So making sure that your production and non-production environments are in sync. In all likelihood, this will extend quite far beyond your records management environment. It could be extending into areas like Active Directory or other infrastructure considerations that you have in your environment. Monitoring is a critical piece of the post-go-live support as well. We strive to be very proactive in our monitoring of the various environments that we're responsible for and to allow early detection of incidents. There's a bunch of different approaches and a bunch of different tools, both within SharePoint and within Collabware, for monitoring the 2 applications themselves. And then finally, security and permissions. Security and permissions is a very interesting, very complex piece of the puzzle here. The permissions model within SharePoint and by extension within Collabware can be quite complex. There's lots of different approaches and different ways in which you can set it up. You're potentially handing off control to various users, whether they're your administrators or whether they're your site owners or your super users. It's worth keeping an eye and having some audits and some review of the way that permissions are being applied within your environment. Permissions can very, very quickly get out of control, which really means that it's very, very hard to troubleshoot within your environment. If you're not able to quickly identify and articulate who can see a particular piece of content, or even which pieces of content a particular user or a particular user group can see, that really could be a challenge in the instance that you need to troubleshoot some problems, or even that if you just need to lock down your environment a little bit further. Simplicity and standardization from a security and from a permissions perspective really do make sense. And that's really where that final bullet point here, the help desk training specifically for the permissions, will come in. There's real value in establishing a really robust approach that all of your team understand, all of your super users understand, in order that everyone sets up those security and those permissions in the same way. So that is a very quick run through of those post go live activities. I'm trying to keep it really brief, but these are the 9 or so kind of key areas that we think you need to really pay attention to from a post go live perspective. So I hope that that was valuable. We're just going to offer a few final thoughts, really revisit some key sort of messaging, some key takeaways from our webinar series, and then we will move into questions. So for the final thoughts, we've got 4 areas that you probably won't have failed to notice as we've been through our webinar series. We think these are critical for success. So number 1, focus on the end user's jobs. This is distinct from focusing on the end users, of course. We're not trying to make records managers of our end users. We're trying to support and enable our end users. And in doing that, we get the opportunity to provide records management capabilities into the environment that they're working in. And we get to fulfill our records management agenda. As much as you possibly can, target additional business value over and above the records management agenda. There's, of course, a lot of business value to be had within records management in terms of managing your compliance, managing your risk as an organization. It's the delivery of the additional business value through which you'll engage your end users and through which you'll engage your stakeholders. So be very mindful about targeting that additional business value as you go through your ECM initiative. Thirdly, we've talked a lot about measurement or our analytics through this process, but as you go through, be sure that you're articulating the value you're going to deliver and then figure out how to measure it, or at least measure proxies of those outcomes. Develop insights based on those measurements, and then finally, be sure that you are able to drive action as a result of those insights in order that you can influence the measures and hopefully improve them. And then finally, don't forget it's a journey. And I say that not really so much for the records management team, because most enterprise content managers really understand that this is a journey, but really work to manage your expectations or manage the expectations of your stakeholders at the beginning of your journey, at the beginning of your project, and throughout your project or your enterprise content management program. It's not a straight line from the start to the finish. There will be curves and potentially even a late night or two. And that's just to be expected. I would say that the more you can manage those expectations within your enterprise, the more you can communicate that there will be lessons learned and challenges through the process, actually the more streamlined your process will be as a result of that. And that concludes our webinar number 5. I hope you have enjoyed our webinar series. Many thanks for your attention throughout. If you have any questions, please don't hesitate to contact me. You can see my email address here on the video. So I look forward to hearing from you. Thanks very much.